Hello and welcome to my presentation on Edgar Allan Poe and his short story, The Telltale Heart. I'm super excited. This is one of my favorite short stories by him, although I have so many favorites by him. But I'm really excited to teach a little bit about it and talk a little bit why I love it so much. I am joining today from my library corner at home, and this is a short story that I actually had on hand, so I'm very excited to go through it today. Okay, so there are two main things we should know to start. The first being Telltale Heart is written by our beloved Edgar Allan Poe, and it was published in the year 1843 in James Russell Lloyd's 1843 publication of The Pioneer. Man, 1843 in America. I mean, this quote pretty much sums it up. One of the gloomiest years in our industrial history, 1843. In America, we were in the middle of a pretty bad depression that had started years prior. And I love this quote and chose it because I feel that the word choice that the author uses really not only encompasses the vibe and mood of the American population in the year 1843, but also mimics a lot of the vibe and mood that we see in Edgar Allan Poe's short stories. The word gloomiest, we'll talk about word choice for the Gothic style much later on, but it definitely gives that vibe right off the bat. Some other historical facts of this time: it was the beginning of the Great Migration westward. And for some historical roots, here we have our president, William Henry Harrison, who was elected in 1842. Fun fact, he was pretty old when he was elected and contracted pneumonia a couple months after he won the presidency and unfortunately passed away. And so in 1843, we have a switch. President John Tyler was our president going into 1843. Enough about American history. Let's talk about the big guy himself. You can see his picture, absolute dapper looking man. He was born, Edgar Allan Poe, born in 1809, and we see him die in 1849 in the city of Baltimore. I added two facts that we learned in our lecture in American Lit this semester because I felt that they were really important in not only encompassing the character of Poe, but where he stood with his peers. So the first is that he was one of the first, or the first, well-known American author to ever try and make a living on writing alone. I think that shows a lot about his character as a person, his determination and grit, and how much he truly loved and found intrinsic motivation from doing things like writing his short stories and poems. The other fact is that he was the first American writer to attempt to define the technical requirements of the new genre. And when I say new genre, I'm talking about dark romanticism and specific the Gothic style. I wanted to include kind of other things that Poe was up to around the time that The Telltale Heart was published. So a couple years before, in 1841, Poe became the editor of Graham's magazine in Philadelphia. A year later, we get his amazing reviews of Nathaniel Hawthorne's Twice Old Tales in 1842. And right up to 1843, we see not only his Telltale Heart published, but two other very popular, infamous Poe short stories are also published. One we've read in class called The Black Cat, and the other was called Goldbug. I include these because I wanted to show how important the year 1843 must have been on influencing Poe's writing. He was clearly very busy in 1843, publishing some, three, possibly more, I could be wrong about that, but three major works that really became infamous to his writing style, and one could argue that it was influenced by what he was seeing in the everyday life of the depression around him in 1843 in America. Enough about what I have to say. What have others said? Specifically, I love this source from B.D. Tucker talking about the Telltale Heart and the evil eye. We see this concept pop up especially in this story, but in other Poe short stories as well, this concept of the evil eye. But I'll get more into that in a moment. The source that I've chosen to analyze is a journal article from the Southern Literary Journal, and it was published in 1981, so a bit after the short story The Telltale Heart was published, clearly, but it gives some amazing analysis, and also shows the significance that the story had, right, in 1843, and then it's still that prominent in 1981, and of course today in the 21st century. B.D. Tucker, in the very beginning, he says that it is one of Poe's more perfectly constructed stories and a very skillful study of madness. The madness portion is key to our dark romanticism genre that Poe writes in, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, but very important that B.D. Tucker also notices that in 1981. We also want to notice that he talks a lot about the all-seeing eye. B.D. Tucker gives a great analysis on what this eye in The Telltale Heart means. So for a little backstory on this, we have this story starts with our narrator, and our narrator is unnamed. One could say that relates to his yearning to be unseen, and he has this close relationship with an old man who lives in this house with him, and the old man is also nameless. But the one thing about the old man that we get, one piece of detail that we get about him, is that not only is he blind, but he has this eye that is pale blue and creeps our narrator out beyond belief, so much so that it eventually leads to the old man's death. So, the eye, B.D. Tucker relates to the all-seeing eye. Poe directly calls the eye the evil eye, evil capitalized and eye capitalized. To me, and clearly to B.D. Tucker as well, that shows an all-seeing eye. B.D. Tucker also claims that we could see some, relationship between Poe not wanting to be seen, but being the seer himself, and therefore the narrator wanting to not be seen by this creepy eye of the old man. We have a voyeur narrator with this lantern that he carries to spy on the old man and try and peer with the light of the lantern, peering into the old man's eye. All of this excellent analysis by B.D. Tucker really, I feel, encompasses not only the interpretation that I took from The Telltale Heart, but also what many others in American society must have taken, which is why it's so impactful. To continue this, B.D. Tucker specifically says that this old man with this vulture eye, as Poe describes, can be seen and thought of as a vulture picking at his dead prey, just as the eye can look at the narrator and pick out the narrator's secrets and deepest, darkest sins that they would rather lay buried. That vulture aspect of the eye, that its innate nature is to do that, is to pick at the parts, the dead, the rotten parts of you, just as a vulture would his prey. I find just an amazing aspect of this short story. And B.D. Tucker does as well. He says that, this vulture eye also could resemble a vindictive, avenging judge or father in discovering secret sin. And if our narrator has an off relationship with some sort of figure like that in their life, it could explain why they're so set off and uncomfortable around this all-peering eye, what sort of secrets that they have lying below. So just quickly, I wanted to show a modern depiction of this all-seeing eye. We see these on bracelets. We see these on some pieces of antique spiritual meditation furniture and little figurines, like in the bottom right-hand corner here. This is something that permeates throughout not only our culture, but religion. Okay, so moving on with the religion aspect, I have 3 photos here of the Eye of Providence, which is the religious depiction of the evil eye. It is supposed to be of divine guidance and protection, and shows why our narrator could be even more deterred by it, because he's so littered with sin and an evil heart, driven to madness, that he can't stand being seen by this eye. The old man, a visual, realistic, physical representation of the embodiment of the narrator's deepest, darkest sins, standing right in front of him, and he can't take that. And that leads to the old man's murder. I put 3 photos up here for a very specific reason. We see in the story not only the religious ties to the Eye of Providence, but the religious symbol meaning of 3, the number 3. At the very end of the short story, 3 policemen knock on the narrator's door. And these 3 men are also there and lead to the narrator's eventual confession of the murder he is about to completely get away with scot-free. I think that these 3 men heavily resemble more religious ties, such as the Eye of Providence, as being the 3 disciples of Christ. One of my favorite scenes in this story is when the narrator is slowly creeping in to the old man's room with just a candle lit, with one ray of light trying to shine on the old man's eye so he could see it. It is such a creepy scene. He spends 1 hour in the old man's doorway trying to slowly peek into the room. And at one point, the old man wakes up. He hears this creak, and he is startled awake. And for 1 hour in the dead of night, the old man, his heart is racing. He's blind, he can't see, but he feels this presence. And I think that this scene really embodies the narrator's hate for the Eye of Providence, his sin being seen. He feels that fear that the old man is now fearing as he creeps into his room. And I just find that scene very interesting. So, post-genre dark romanticism really focuses the same that Nathaniel Hawthorne does, a similar author. We see double self and double identity, obsession, perversion and the unstable psyche, insanity versus rationality, and mankind's relationship with death. Okay, so this slide I want to talk about some of the styles of Gothic that I picked out in the book. This dark, gloomy, depressing vibe we see with his word choice of dreadfully in the very first line of the short story. One of his eyes resembled that of a vulture, a pale blue eye with a film over it. Such a creepy, gloomy depiction of somebody's eye. Even his questioning of would a madman have been so wise as this, in relation to thinking of all the ways he could cover up the crime. I was never kinder to the old man than during the week before I killed him. What a depressing, sad, dark sentence to put in the story. And honestly, just amazing literary decisions on Posen. It not only sets the scene, but really shows the psyche of the narrator, which is something that is a staple of dark romanticism. Okay, I know I'm running low on time here, so I will be quick with this, but I just feel it's important to add into this presentation. Darlene Harbour Unruh, this source I find is a really amazing explanation and showing of what others view as Poe, and also what I view him as an author. This source is from the International Journal of the Classical Tradition, posted in 1995. And on the next slide, I will go into a little bit more depth about the specific part that I find the most important about this source. And that part is the wealth of contradictory designations attest not only to the elusiveness of Poe, but also perhaps to his genius and to the failure of most critics and scholars, particularly American, to fully comprehend him. I find this so important because it shows that Poe cannot be nailed down in just one genre. Yes, he did define dark romanticism in Gothic style, but his short stories, if you've read more than just a couple, they range from so many different genres and keep coming back to his own concoction of his signature of writing. And I just think that that is really why he set the stage for American literature well into the 21st century modern writing. In conclusion, Poe was a Romanticism movement writer, specifically dark Romanticism from the 18th century to the mid-19th century. His work influenced many movements and authors for generations after his death, and primarily focused in Gothic literature. These themes permeate not only in the 19th century America, but today in modern day writing, which I think is attests to his genius and his artistry and ability to connect not only with people in 1843, but people in 2024. He also influenced the French symbolist movement, and we can see that through his heavy use of symbolism. The lantern, the eye, and that symbolism still takes root in all of his other short stories. Thank you so much for a great semester. I am sorry for going over on time, but I just really love this short story and I love Edgar Allan Poe. I feel like I could have gone on for another 10 minutes, but thank you so much, and I hope you enjoyed my presentation on Edgar Allan Poe's short story, The Telltale Heart.